Let's formally open the meeting, the Front Gardens Network meeting, our first meeting of 2026. I'm Paul De Silva. I'm the chair of the network on behalf of CPRE London. My other hat is London National Park City and a small but crazily ambitious river action group in southeast London called Quaggy Waterways Action Group. And I'm going to hand over to Alice from CPRE to talk a bit about the network and what we're trying to do. And then we'll get into our featured guest speaker, and we'll have questions on the back of that. And then we've got some updates and discussion to give you, because quite a lot has been going on issues related to front gardens, if not directly about front gardens, and certainly contextually important. So it's a good update to that. So I'm going to hand over to Alice, my colleague, who will give you a welcome and an update. Alice, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. So great to see so many people here. I'm just going to quickly go through why we created the Front Garden Network. So I'm Alice Roberts, I'm from CPRE London, and we have done a lot of work around parking in the past, which led us to think about front gardens, but we also chair something called the More Natural Capital Coalition, which is a coalition of organisations across London, charities across London, who have an interest in the natural environment. Can you hear me all right? Yeah. So when we came to think about front gardens, we had a number of things in mind. One was about hard surfacing. Sorry, I'm also monitoring the chat, the waiting room. So yeah, forgive me for the distraction. If anybody has their, I'm just going to mute that one. Sorry, just mute a couple of people. So just really briefly, the reason that we came to think about front gardens was because of so much paving of gardens, and that the need to do something about it, but that we held a webinar called Front Gardens on the Front Line. And there were so many people and so much interest, and we realized that there were so many people doing things around London that we thought, well, let's create a network and we can all share information and hear from other groups. And so we've held meetings and we have a newsletter now, and our focus really is about kind of four things. One is the street scene, so just how the street looks and feels. So if you live on a street with lots of really lovely front gardens with lots of flowers and so forth, that's really nice. It's about the heat effect of having a lot of paving. It's about the ecology of having lots of paving, so the lack of habitat, and how you can obviously increase habitat by improving gardens, front gardens. And then finally about water management, so surface water management and flooding, water coming off roofs, but also coming off hard surfaces, which will contribute to flooding and also to river pollution in parts of London. So yeah, that's me. I'm going to hand back to Paul.
Just checking the numbers, up to 63, so that's healthy. I think we had 100 people saying they would join, but we will. So just a reminder, if you've just joined, if you can mute your microphone when you're not speaking. This is participative, it's not one way, so there's plenty of time for questions. We have our speaker in a tick, and there's Q&A and discussion out of that. A reminder of the network: we have a meeting, and then we have a newsletter where we try and sum up things. You can sign up for the newsletter. Someone's just asked that. Hilary of Transition Tooting has asked about signing up for the newsletter. You do that by dropping a line to Alice, I think is correct, and Alice will stick a link in that. If you missed the last newsletter, it's a bumper edition because lots has been going on which is relevant to our agenda here on resilience, flooding, water, and more. You know, I also think we were chatting just before this that for an issue that we've always felt was kind of, without getting too carried away, there's a long way to go. But for an issue that was nowhere on the agenda, I think we're doing quite well to get it onto the agenda. And this network has a really important role of helping to kind of prove that too. So plenty of discussion to go. I think we should turn to our special guest speaker, Joyce from Lendon Tend, who, funnily enough, was part of the first blog that I did for on the issue of front gardens for London National Park City. We were trying to work out when that was, 4 or 5 years ago, I think. So Joyce Veheary of Lendon Tend is going to present to us on her work, and no doubt that will stimulate lots of great discussion. And I'm going to hand over to Joyce right now to take it away and keep us on our toes. Thanks, Joyce, and welcome.
Hi everybody and good afternoon. Well, first of all, it's actually really encouraging and quite exciting that we're all together here, knowing that front gardens matter. These spaces, some smaller, some bigger, they are the most visible and powerful areas for action. So I'm very glad I'm kind of speaking to the choir here about front gardens and also biodiversity loss. And yeah, it's just really surprising how our front gardens are still one of the most overlooked forms of green infrastructure that we have, that can actually sort of shift the dial. And my kind of most recent work really kind of focuses on the visibility of front gardens, and what makes front gardens uniquely important is they kind of signal care for nature on our doorsteps, and kind of like what was mentioned earlier, they kind of shape how neighbourhoods feel, and then sort of structurally they can kind of influence planning conversations and policy. And yes, and because of cars and the need for transport, the quiet or loud now visible loss of front gardens to paving and development isn't just a sort of ecological issue, it's very much very emotive, very cultural, social issue. So to introduce myself, I am Joyce Veheary, and about 10, 11, 12 years ago, I founded a project called Lendon Tend, and largely it's a garden sharing activity that invites people that don't have gardening space to people who don't have gardening space, who might be waiting for an allotment or live with a flat and a balcony or just not have anywhere to garden and want to garden. It invites those people to share gardens with people who have the space, perhaps have a garden but maybe don't want to or can't use it or can't manage it. And that project specifically is about sharing time, maybe a garden owner sharing skills, sharing responsibility, and a kind of quiet community action by pairing people up and either growing food, generally pottering around in the garden, or biodiversity action. And a couple of years ago I was joined by a couple of people, Lenka Mudrich, great name, and Mark Pierce, who I think is on the call with us today, our new Chief of Operations. And last year with Lendon Tend, we kind of grew a new green offshoot, which is the Wilder Gardens project. And with that, the hope is, and it's a more inclusive, biodiversity focused, as I say, green offshoot to Lendon Tend. So Wilder Gardens from Lendon Tend exists because obviously not everyone can Lendon Tend, it's quite a small audience, but everybody can support nature. So yeah, Wilder Gardens was created to include all gardens, not just shared ones. And really it's to help people make the most of their gardens for biodiversity and support people where they are, either waiting for help, or just starting out on your sort of garden discovery journey, or maybe you've got a garden and want some new ideas. Specifically, Wilder Gardens kind of responds to biodiversity loss and awareness of that, inequality of access to green space, in line with the original Lendon Tend mission, and the need to make action feel much more easy, social, visible, which kind of led us to the initiative, which encompasses, first of all, our kind of motto, which is to give back to nature. And that's something that we can all do: garden owners, lenders, tenders, people with any sort of access to outside space. And a way that we kind of have designed a mechanism to help us give back to nature is by introducing neighbourhood nature reserves. So what neighbourhood nature reserves are is a way to kind of embody how nature works in networks. So should we, in our neighbourhoods, and this is kind of what I say is community action, but with a small c. When you talk about community and community projects, it can either make people feel very included and bring them in, or it can scare a lot of people away. So that's why I say it's kind of community action with a small c. So the idea is, with neighbourhood nature reserves, is we want to support small clusters of neighbouring gardens. Yes, web links will be available later, thank you. So with small cluster of neighbouring gardens, the idea is a number of around 5 or 6 gardens. So typically, let's say half a dozen gardens in a road, in a cul-de-sac, a row of balconies, in a block of flats. And we're talking about sort of combined action from potentially non-contiguous gardens. So these gardens don't have to be next to each other in a terrace. They can be, you know, like I say, scattered across the road, you know, opposite one another. But essentially what we're doing is creating a streetscape. So these gardens don't need to be physically connected, but what we're doing is inviting people to join us with our kind of neighbourhood nature reserves movement, because what matters the most, aside from connection, is the proximity, our shared intent, and the visibility of what we're doing, which you know, we've taken inspiration from ecological principles and practices. And what really matters to many species is that they rely on networks of nearby habitats and not necessarily isolated patches. And not to focus too much on the theme of water, but for example, a lot of people approach me and say, oh, I've got a pond in my garden, but I've got no amphibians, not, you know, what's going on? What can I do? And really, it's not the fact that that person isn't doing a great job with one pond in their garden. It might just be that there are no other ponds in a local vicinity. So therefore, you're not creating that migratory habitat for those animals. And most of us with garden fences have those cement blocks under the fence posts to keep the fences up. So what we're doing is allowing people to find out ways to support those species and create habitats for biodiversity. So by acting together, not necessarily community with a big C, but by acting together, we can create small, meaningful habitat mosaics, and also support species, specific species locally. And this can be a species that you love, or a species that you know is in decline, by looking at the biodiversity mapping websites available. And this is something that all of us can do without any sort of specialist ecological knowledge. So a way that we can be part of the neighbourhood nature reserves is by taking a couple of actions. So the first action to make, you know, biodiversity visible, local and relatable, and this is something that we piloted last year in Bristol, is by actually putting up mascots in the garden. And a little bit like how you see in people's gardens and windows that you're part of a neighbourhood watch scheme. These signages suggest that you're in a neighbourhood nature reserve area. And I'll just share my screen just to kind of show you what I mean by signage. Excuse me while I just do this. Okay, so I'll just get to this. So this is just the signage and what people can demonstrate and put up in their gardens. This is the Wilder Gardens frog. with a QR code, which allows you passing by to find out more about the action. This is a bullfinch. Nettle. A lot of people are surprised by the wish to support nettle because it's obviously a great biodiversity boosting plant, and it's also a very good plant for us humans. But a lot of people want to banish the nettle, and it's actually quite a useful plant for biodiversity, of course. So that's a plant that we chose to highlight as a mascot 'cause it's much maligned by a lot of people. This is very specifically important to this neighbourhood in Knowle West in South East Bristol. This is the holly blue, and these are just mascots laser printed with sort of thin ply, hung in gardens. And this is the much loved hedgehog and robin. A lot of people have a very strong fondness for robin, and actually it's with the fact sheets that you can find out on the Wilder Gardens project, it's actually a bit of a bully, as some of you may know. They're very territorial and they can be quite mean to other birds. So where lots of people might be very friendly and put up, you know, bird feeders, and you know the robins come and rely on those bird feeders, there are obviously more actions that we can do in our gardens by planting specific, maybe native plants to encourage other wildlife, other birds. And this is Mark, if you're on the call, Mark, wave. And this is just a demonstration of some of the larger mascots that show neighbourhood nature reserve visibility in areas. And I'll just stop sharing the screen just whilst I carry on talking for a moment. Oh, how can I stop sharing? There we are. Thank you. Ooh. So yeah, so those are the mascots and the visibility that I was talking about. But one of the other most important actions that we ask of people is that in not only just your front garden you can display that you're part of the neighbourhood nature reserve. What we're asking all garden owners to do is to take a garden biodiversity score. Get a garden biodiversity score and get a certificate. So much like how one would have an EPC rating for their homes, we're asking garden owners to do a GBC score, which is your garden biodiversity certificate score. And essentially what you're doing is, by scoring your garden, you can find out, even if it's entirely paved and you don't want any visible nature in your garden, what can you do to increase the biodiversity score of your garden by taking small actions. And it's very individual to your needs and your garden, your space. And it's really, really interesting because some of the people that I've spoken to and who've asked to do a garden biodiversity score certificate, is they've said, oh yeah, my garden is a biodiverse haven. I've got 4 ponds, I've got bird feeders, da da da. And there's always one thing we can do to improve our garden biodiversity score. So it's just a sort of fun tool. I mean, it would be great if it was kind of legislated and we all had to do it, but it's just a fun tool. Just to increase awareness, visibility, allow sort of education to find out, you know, what you can do in your garden. And you know, it's something that's relatable to most of us. With, you know, if you live in a house, you know what an EPC score is. So essentially, we're sort of choosing local species. One can choose species to support by looking at your local NBN atlas. Again, I can put a link up for that later. And you could potentially choose a local NBN based mascot to support in your area. So for example, in the Knowle West area, we use the holly blue butterfly, and it's just, again, signalling that this is a neighbourhood nature reserve. We've taken our garden biodiversity scores and we've got a certificate, and it's just signalling to passers-by, to visitors, to local residents that this neighbourhood is cared for. This road, this street, this balcony, this block of terraces, it's cared for, and obviously by demonstrating that care, we can make waves and make more movements in the upper echelons of how things function with local councils, and looking at their local nature recovery strategies and how we can address perhaps what's really specific to our neighbourhoods and what we can do to support biodiversity and nature in both front and back gardens, but specifically the visibility in front gardens kind of highlights the importance that, you know, we can do something for our gardens no matter what kind of garden we have, what our enthusiasm for wilding our gardens are. Essentially, you can visit the Lendon Tend / Wilder Gardens page to get your garden biodiversity score. I can put that link up in a moment, and I'm sure Paul and Alice can share those on the newsletter or the next sort of mail out that goes out. Yeah, and essentially the hope is that the score will provide you with some garden specific advice, some location specific guidance, and it's really about a sense of progress, not perfection. And you know, the hope is that it can help with sort of wider light touch biodiversity monitoring, and also just evidence that we care at a street level. And it could potentially help with shared learning across communities, and just help people make you feel that you're part of something bigger. And obviously this, I hope, is something that would be useful and helpful for CPRE and other groups to demonstrate public value of front gardens, and for there to be visible local evidence of nature stewardship. So not every single house or flat or property in a street or a postcode has to do it, but hopefully we like to start seeing those mascots dotted around. And you know, the hope is that it strengthens the case for protection in planning decisions. And yeah, so it's practical, neighbour-led and scalable, and it really just highlights the fact that our front gardens are not just private spaces. These are sort of shared ecological infrastructure for a plethora of species, animals, plants. You know, and they aren't just our driveways, they aren't just our spaces where we keep the bins and you know, enter our homes. They're spaces that we do need to consider require sharing with other species. So essentially, yeah, with the Wilder Gardens mission, we want to sort of support that front gardens. They are small but collectively very powerful, and they can help build stronger communities, and we can protect green space where people live. I can just share with you again just a bit of information. Oh, I've lost it. Sorry, excuse me. Where is it? About what we're doing with our kind of ecosystem diagram. So the neighbourhood nature reserves info on the left here is specifically related to a project that we're working on in Bristol, where our goal is water-based, based on their local LNRS, local nature recovery strategy focused on water. And we've got a very crazy goal that we want to encourage 100 ponds to be built across Bristol. But that's obviously very different depending on where your neighbourhood is and what your local nature recovery strategy is, you know, where you are in London. But essentially how it all fits together is that, you know, Lendon Tend is all about garden sharing, and the offshoot of that is Wilder Gardens, which is a community engagement programme and helping connect gardens to landscape scale action through local nature recovery strategies. And the mechanism for achieving that is via people taking the GBC, the Garden Biodiversity Certificate, and saying, yes, I want to give back to nature and become part of a neighbourhood nature reserve. And you can do that quietly, or you could, you know, display one of these lovely mascots, either a sticker in your window or a mascot to say that you're signalling that you're part of it. And that's it.
Thank you so much. So that's it. I think there's quite a lot
A
in
lot,
there.
sorry.
You undersell yourself. I'm sure that will stimulate lots of questions. I've taken a note. There are a few in the chat, which I've noted a few. Getting some rounds of applause. Thank you. That's always welcome. Feel free to add. I'll invite people to come in just to speed things along. There are some questions that there are 3 questions that I picked out already that you could probably answer one. First one was, is Lendon Tend in a particular borough? So the answer is no. It pops up wherever people want to do it. It is, I guess, what you're saying. Do you want to say more on that?
Yeah, I mean, I was until a couple of years ago based in London. The company has now formally established in Sheffield. We're working on a project in Bristol. It's basically where people want to sign up. I generally try and create a bit of activity in the area where it needs a bit of support by writing to local newsletters, Facebook ads, trying to get people focused on that area to sort of boost visibility. So if you sign up, yeah, I can do a bit of a boost of visibility. We desperately need more lenders in London, garden lenders. But yeah, you don't have to want to share your garden to be part of the Wilder Gardens movement. You just have to want to give back to nature, and in a very small way. You know, you could want to either completely transform your garden and make it a biodiverse haven for species that are needing help in your area, or you might just want to take one tile off of your driveway, like the movement in the Netherlands called Tegel Wippen tile Tegel. Sorry, excuse me if anyone's Dutch here, but it's basically called tile flipping, and large swathes of people are taking up like a tile or 5 tiles in their front driveways to make space for nature. But yeah, it's not exclusively based in any area. Anyone can take part anywhere.
Great stuff. Mark, your colleague Mark Wilder Gardens has put in the chat the Garden Pledge of the Garden Biodiversity Survey. This reminds me, at the previous meeting, Alice, was it the last one or the one before, Rosie presented, and she talked about reclaiming the concept of protected status, didn't it? You know, we formally designate, you know, national parks or nature reserves and what have you, and it's always drawing it down to the local level. And she was working on a methodology for mapping of front gardens from the street level with a biodiversity performance certificate, BPC for homes, and this idea of, you know, garden nature reserves. So there's some kind of parallel thinking going on here as well as action. So that was kind of interesting. I can't remember which meeting that was, but I think it was the last one, wasn't it? Yeah. The other question I've got here is it Carol who said, Carol, I think asked, I don't understand what mascot, the signs you showed, Joyce, what mascot you would be used on each sign. Could you explain how you choose?
Yeah, so we're just trialing something at the moment in Bristol with the mascots. So we've got 7 or 8 different mascots, and I chose these mascots because these were species in decline, and essentially you choose your mascot much like you choose a dangly toy in the front your rear view mirror in your car. It's just something that you want to choose to support. So if you love hedgehogs, for example, you could choose the hedgehog mascot, even if perhaps hedgehogs were maybe like the 5th species in decline, and maybe dragonflies are the most, you know, needy species in your local area. Essentially, it's just I thought was an aesthetically pleasing way of representing the neighbourhood nature reserves movement, and what's really more important is the QR code, and the QR code essentially, you know, links to Wilder Gardens, the neighbourhood nature reserves movement, how you can get involved, what does this mascot mean, the link to the NBN Atlas, how you can find out about it, how you can find out more. So yeah, so the well, just sort of full transparency, the mascots aren't sort of widely available just at the moment because we had these made up in Bristol, but we're currently in talks about how we might make them very sort of widely available, because I've, you know, potentially got access to 100 or so of them. But if the entirety of the UK suddenly goes, I want a mascot in my front garden, then I need to think about how we might fabricate these and allow everyone to have some kind of mascot. It might be just something like a sticker that you can put in your window your porch or your front window in your home, or also obtaining the Ply mascot if you really want to kind of support the mission and create visibility. And the hope is that in some way, at some kind of in some kind of structured way, is to maybe have a mascot on a street sign, to say like this is a neighbourhood nature reserve, much like how you get those kind of signs that say this is, like the brown signs that show like tourist spots, like this is a sign for pottery in this area. That's more Staffordshire related, I suppose. Anyway, sorry, I'm waffling, but yeah, we're kind of working on how we're kind of roll out the mascots on a very wide, how we share them widely. But yes, the mascot you can choose yourself. We're not going to impose any mascot on anyone that wants them.
No imposition here. No, that's good.
Well, you've muted yourself somehow.
I have. I'm doing that. I should stop doing that. There we go. I'm going to bring people in. Just before I bring Suzanne in, who's got her hand raised, I'm looking to see if there are others. There's another. People have been asking about how to join. So Mark has also put that you can register for Lend and Tend on the website. That was one of the questions: is how do you? Hillary in Tooting has talked about. Well, thanks for the talk and loved it, and some crossover with the scheme that they did, the competition which they ran in Tooting on Pollinator Paradise. It was a 1 year only, but love to revive the idea. She put a link in there to transition Tooting's Pollinator Paradise project. And there's a question also about, are there any schemes to encourage de-paving of front gardens done across neighbourhoods? There is a lot of paving local to us, like the Netherlands initiative, funding, sharing of information, collective approaches to purchasing materials, etc., etc. More of a general question, not necessarily for Joyce, so people could come in on that as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I was wondering, I might just say a couple of things now.
Yeah.
So I think that's a lot of people come to this meeting because they're quite interested to see how other people are approaching action on front gardens. And I think there is a bit of a kind of theme about how people do it, which is essentially it is either an individual or a small group of people who almost literally go door knocking, and they may be doing different things. They may be simply encouraging rewilding or real planting days, or lots of different things, and some of those you can see in the chat. So it might be a competition, a front garden, garden in bloom or something like that. So there are different ways of doing it, but I think the fundamentals are that the community action is based around one person going, or a group of people going and actually collecting like households, if you like, who would like to take action, and then perhaps mapping those, maybe encouraging them to do things, maybe giving them a helping hand, maybe providing materials, maybe. So I think it's all very different, and we're just trying to kind of encourage people to do more. I don't think there's any one approach. There's no definite approach that one place has done over another. I think there are a lot of people councils I've seen encouraging de-paving or regreening of gardens, but not a huge amount of obviously physical support is very often quite difficult. There are some examples of where councils have helped, but not. I don't think there are many in London right now, in central London, in London boroughs right now. Yeah.
Just a button. So I don't know how to put the hand up on my computer because I can't find the icon. But we did have a meeting, didn't we, with Haringey, Alice, if you remember, and they'd done a kind of advertising campaign about lifting slabs, but they hadn't. I guess they hadn't had the resources to produce any, money to help with people. But they were going to get back to us, weren't they? Do you remember she was going to ask about if there'd been any feedback on that campaign, from members of the public? So that's something we should chase. But that's the only thing I can think of about, de-paving in London. Paul, I think you're on mute again.
Yeah. Just like to take it off. Suzanne's had her hand up very patiently. So, Suzanne, do you want to unmute yourself and come in?
Hello. I'm just trying to get it from my colleague. She's starting a 2 meter squared campaign, and they've created an infographic, funnily enough, through an estate agent. So they're using competing estate agents who are advertising the 2 meter square. So it is de-paving. It's a bit like the Holland model, but it's just 2 meter square, and it explains the amount of surface water that you can attenuate through 2 meter square. We're in Brent. We're part of Brent Friends of the Earth and ACE Brent, which is Action Against Climate Emergency. We're having regular meetings with the council, and our consortium is getting bigger and bigger. So the key, and we've got some of our colleagues here today on the on the webinar. Sorry, the 2 meter square campaign is going to be quite useful because it's a start. If you can get those that are less willing to do that, and you've got estate agents who are actively promoting this, you're hitting the hardcore areas of the problem, and we are able to start getting wards and residents associations to start mapping their really intensive areas where there is edge to edge paving. And the weather is helping because we are now getting reports of flooding. Brent is subject to surface water flooding. We work with Thames Water and Thames 21. Yay, they're quite helpful. And they are willing to put in street suds. So we're looking at traffic island street suds, which are biodiverse, and the water goes into the suds instead of into the drainage network. So we're looking at working on streets. Eastcote has a wonderful example, and we've got photographs that we can share of the Eastcote shopping street sud, which is an island in the middle of the traffic, working really well. So it's a two-pronged approach, looking at front garden biodiversity and water attenuation, and slowly, because your house is at risk of flooding, it's starting to open up the ground of the front garden again. So in a way, climate crisis is being our best friend for biodiversity through the back door.
It's like all the pennies starting to drop. People wanting to know what they can do, and there are lots of routes in. Thank you, Suzanne. That's really interesting, and I think this is a great example of people reacting to other things. This is partly what the network's about, not just at the meeting, but in between as well, and through the newsletter. So have a think about what you want to give profile to in the newsletter. If you've got a project, whack it down as an idea for us to feature in the newsletter, or if you want to come on and talk about it, present on it. Can I check if there are any other questions for Joyce? I've seen Alice has got a hand up and Carol has her hand up, and I'll go with those two now. Carol, sorry.
Just quickly,
Yeah.
I want to say, while everybody's still here, that Thames Water have opened a fund which is about property level action. So I'm putting the link in here now. And I'm just going to, so it says property level solutions, allocating of funding will be in 6 rounds. First call for projects closes 31st of March, so lots of time. Have a look at that. Really important, I think, and very exciting that Thames Water have. Sorry, I am going to post it when I get a chance.
So
I think I have.
Alice, I've already done it.
Okay.
I've already done it for you. It's already in there.
What's going on? Go on. Yeah, sorry, there was something else, but I'll come back to it.
Okay.
We go to Carol. Yeah.
Carol, are you still there? Can't see.
I am still there, but actually I forgot completely the question I wanted to ask. So I just wanted to say that I wanted to actually talk as well about the Thames Water thing, which you just talked about, which is great. Yeah, I work for a council as a sustainability officer, and I'm really interested in all that because I live in Lewisham, and I look after a community garden. So I've got lots of kind of trying to actually do things in different areas. But yes, in Westminster, we are trying to definitely a bit deep one, trying to actually work on de-paving and stuff like that in council estates. but it's very, very difficult. And in Westminster, they don't want to get rid of parking spaces in streets, of course, like that. But do you have recommendations on how do you call that, permeable paving that actually work? Because we've done one in Colgate Street, or not we, but the council in Lewisham has done one in the other station, and it just doesn't work. It gets blocked all the time. I would like to have recommendation of things that work as far as permeable surfaces for parking spots, because if we can't do anything else, let's at least do that. Thank you. Sorry.
There is an issue about ongoing maintenance with that as well. And again, if you look at I can put the specific link in, but there are some. So, quick background: the Christine Eberall of Ealing Front Gardens project, who I know for years and work with, and she's not able to be on the call today, but she's done loads of work looking at good and bad practice. And the London National Park City Front Gardens website has got quite a lot of good stuff. I put a link into some of that, but there's loads of other stuff on there. And she talks a lot about matrix paving and the ongoing issue of maintenance, because overcoming this perception that once you've done something, you've done it and you don't need to maintain it. It's a bit like assuming you don't need to maintain your gutters or whatever. So there's a cultural issue there, I think, as well. But I'll find the link to that. There's some really good blogs on that site that Christine and I cooperated on, rooted in evidence on a whole range of things, including things such as the rise in homes with expanded paving because they've got 2 or 3 vehicles, not just one. And then road runoff, pollution, hedges, the cooling effect, or what's being lost, and things like that. So I'll stick the link into there, and you can scroll away and have a look, because there is lots of stuff there. But I think what's coming out from this meeting and looking at the chat, there's lots of really good examples of people just doing stuff. So we'd like to hear more about all of those, and obviously share the knowledge and get people working together as well as possible. So
I would just add to that. I would add to that, Carol, that I would I don't know if you already have, but try to get a WhatsApp group together of all of the people who are interested in community gardening in the estate. So we've got one in Hackney, and it's extraordinary how big it is. I was so surprised. So through that chat, that is community gardeners working on estates around Hackney. I've been able to ask them questions about how they're, for example, capturing water from roofs, or whether they want to do that, or whether they need help, or like look at funding street, you know. But so it's much better. You're better together, if you like, more people, more ideas. So I definitely encourage you to do that if you haven't already. And yeah, just amazing amount of connections being made in the chat. I'm very impressed and very happy about that, and all the ideas as well.
Let's put a link into the blog that's on the London National Park City Front Gardens blog site that Christine did on matrix paving, and if you go from there, you should be able to find lots of the other really good content stuff, including the first blog that Christine and I did, which mentions Joyce way back when. Suzanne, you've still got your hand up. Is that a new point, or are you as a legacy hand, as people like to call it?
Sorry, I'll remove.
No, that's okay. Does anyone else want to come in? And I apologise if I've missed something. There's so much going on, which is a good thing. Is anyone bursting to ask Joyce a question, or to raise any other point that's been stimulated as a result of this discussion? And if not, what I might do is just run through a brief summary of some of what also been going on. So Alice talked about the Thames Water funding thing. There's definitely a North London thing going on here between Barnet and Brent and Islington. So just you go down the pub or get on a call and compare some notes and what have you. There's lots of chat going on in there. I think one of the things I'm conscious of, and I'll say it just now so Alice, is that we've previously been saying, how can we have more and better contact with local authorities, and so how do we do more of that, almost as probably as a in and of itself, rather than just as part of this monthly or quarterly meeting. Right. Haven't seen anyone. Is anyone bursting to say something or ask a question or take us in a different direction? No? Lots of stuff going on. Yeah, lots of really good stuff. Okay. I'm going to briefly thank you so much for all of that. That's really good. So much quality stuff. And a formal thanks to Joyce. And that sounds really good. And I love the openness of it and the experiment and empowering people and the kind of find your own way with it, with guidance stuff, and the people even doing clapping emojis. So there we go. That's a sign of approval. Thank you so much. And we'll summarize all of that in the next newsletter. There is a link in the chat if you want to sign up for the newsletter, or if you want to see the last one, which had lots of content, then do. I'll just repeat that right now. So briefly, a brief update from me, and Alice has already done her update on the latest funding, kind of community household focused funding opportunity from Thames Water. Putting in bids for these things can be a bit of a nightmare, I have to say, but that's not to try and put a dampener on anything. In terms of broader context, and I will stick the detail because I've prepared for this earlier, there is some quite interesting stuff that has gone on that's kind of either directly or indirectly related to the whole front gardens issue. The first thing to mention is, if you didn't notice it, then last year, so we are going back to last year for some of this, in October, the Royal Horticultural Society produced their State of Gardening report, and some first ever mapping of gardens in the UK. And they basically found out that their mapping shows that 42% of domestic garden space is paved over. 55% of that 42% is front garden space. So I'll stick a link in the chat to that. In October, it was Flood Action Week, and the government decided that what it would do for front gardens. Flood Week was to recommend some good plants for gardens, and I'm not responsible for the ones they chose, but it's probably worth having a look yourself. I will put the link in for that. I'll do that right now. I think I've got too much copy, but whatever. I'll work on that too. The other thing to mention is, and linked, I think, directly to the issue of front gardens, because when you cover over a garden, you encourage the drying out of this underlying soil. So the insurance industry, it's very interesting if you, well, I find it interesting because partly what I do is I track all this kind of slightly dweeby type stuff. The insurance industry is getting really concerned about property subsidence, and one of the things they are doing is reporting routinely on the costs that they're paying out due to property subsidence, which very often trees get the blame, and that's a bit dodgy actually, but they are starting to realise that they do need to start looking at this, and they have released their latest figures on the hit to the insurance industry due to changing climate, but also the fact that a lot of properties are suffering subsidence, and I think that is something we can utilise. So I'll stick that in the link as well. Also in the autumn, in September, MPs came out with a big report on resilience to flood risk, So in terms of the rising number of properties that are affected and potentially at risk or not very resilient to flood risk, including surface water, which is rising as we tend to blame rivers for flooding, but actually surface water from roads and streets and neighbourhoods is part of the problem and the costs of that. And there's a lot more besides on all of that, so I won't run through everything. The other thing to note, and this is one to keep an eye on, is that last week the government came out with its water white paper. So there's been a lot of attention, obviously, on the sewage scandal and the misbehaviour of water companies and shareholders and what have you. The water white paper was essentially the government signalling its broad direction, and whilst it's going to focus quite a lot on yes, the restructuring of the water industry, the regulation of the regulators, so they're getting rid of Ofwat and getting a new regulator, and yes, they're looking at the sewage side of things. They also recognise they need to deal with the non-sewage, what I call the non-sewage pollutants, which can be, runoff from roads, runoff from fertilizers and pesticides in fields or gardens, and all the litter and stuff that ends up washing into our rivers and waterways. And the water white paper is not as detailed as it needs to be, but it gives a direction of travel, and we're now looking to see whether the government starts addressing these other issues in the legislation that it is going to propose in the King's Speech. And so on page, I forgot what page it is, I think it's page 33 of the Water White Paper, it does actually talk about a shift from dealing with pollution when it's caused to actually trying to stop it earlier. So through things like rainwater management, sustainable drainage, and things like that. So that's just something to be aware of. That is not directly related to front gardens, but it's important context for the front gardens debate. So I'll stick us some of those links and summaries in the chat while we go, and I'll pause there and invite Carol to come back in.
Oh, thank you. I was just writing it all. I just wanted to actually say this is exactly what I had forgotten to say earlier. I did my master's in environment 13 years ago, and at the time my teacher was in the insurance industry, or one of my teachers, and she was explaining exactly that even at the time 13 years ago, the cost to the insurance industry of flood risk and surface flooding was increasing and going to such heights that they were actioning, basically, or doing actions to try to help against flood risk. So my question is, can we push or work with basically the insurance industries to see whether, like Thames Water, we can get grant or things like that to help us, not us only, but across the government, the UK, to do things to help with de-paving and such other projects, because it's costing them so much money, and that might be a good way to reduce their cost. Well, prevention.
In a way, what you've just said, Carol, is goes to the heart of one of the things, I guess, that between quite a few of people on the call, Christine, Alice and I and others, Create Streets, who we've been working with, is how can we start, how can I best describe it? How can we start to flip the cost into a source of funding that allows stuff to happen? And some work has been done to work out what it costs the likes of Thames Water, let's say, to deal with all the surface water runoff and the cleanup costs, and how could you turn that into a positive? So I won't go into detail on that, but there is thinking going in on that. Alice, do you want to say something about that at all?
Well, really just to say that we have tried quite hard to contact various insurance companies, and we don't have a lot of resource to do this stuff, so we haven't made a massive effort, but we have tried, and we haven't had a lot of it's not been an open door really, so but it's certainly something that we recognize is important. I just Joyce and I think Annabelle wanted to say something. Joyce first?
Well, this is something we definitely feel like doing the having the garden biodiversity certificate is actually going to potentially pinpoint what areas need that support, and what you know, where we're sort of thinking about what stakeholders could be active supporters in making our areas more biodiverse. This is exactly it. You know, thinking about who are these big corporations who we have to pay for utilities. You know, how can we get them to sort of support, you know, biodiversity action? Because you might move into a home that you haven't necessarily completely tarmacked or block paved, but you know, who has thousands of pounds to, you know, lift an entire driveway up? But yeah, hopefully it's you know, with masses of people taking up doing the garden biodiversity certificate, we hope that really sort of signals where support is needed and evidence, you know, these are willing communities. There are thousands, hopefully in the future, thousands of residents that actually want to create changes and need the support. So yeah, just get a garden biodiversity certificate score, share with your neighbours, say, hey, let's join the neighbourhood nature recovery scheme and the neighbourhood nature reserves, and yeah, let's make ourselves visible in our actions and in our shared intent.
So in many ways, what we're trying to do is we're working on a number of levels, trying to network and empower and support and inform and link a growing network, trying to do some of the influence at a higher level, you know, whether it's London-wide or even national policy, give visibility to some of all of that. So thanks, Carol. I see you've got to go. So it's really good. Keep in touch. Sign up to the newsletter if you haven't already, and or whatever. Send us stuff that you want to know. Tell us what you need as well. We're nearing the end, or we've got a bit of flexibility. I see Anne's got her hand up. If you want to have a think about what would you still find useful, what, you know, it could be I just don't know where to start, or it could be I need to know about X, or actually who do you know who's already, or I'd like to present at a future meeting, or I'd like to contribute to the newsletter. Have a think about that. Tell us what you need. You know, it's not one way, it's a network. And we need more examples of stuff going on to give it that visibility. So and hopefully you know, people then start sparking off each other in true network style. Over to Anne, who's got her hand up.
Just a really quick comment, actually, which is that I was wondering whether, Alice, you'd been in touch with ABI, the Association of British Insurers, because it's a peak body. So that if you haven't, it might be a good sort of entry point. And the other potential entry point is the City Guild, the Insurers City Guild, because I went to a sort of like a roundtable session a couple of years ago, which was convened by the Solicitors Guild and the Insurers Guild, exactly to talk about sort of the nexus and what insurers and solicitors could do to try and address some of these issues. So there certainly are people in the insurance world who are taking a lead on this, and maybe going through one of those two routes might help get you to the right people.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, Annabelle, I think we tried to.
Well, I think Christine was trying to correspond with the Association of British Insurers, and I could be wrong, but I don't think that got anywhere. And then Direct Line actually did a report several years ago about the front garden paving over, and, you know, the cost to the insurance company. And I contacted them, but they then got back to me saying they weren't planning to do any more work on that particular piece of research that they had done. So we've sort of gone around the houses a bit on the insurance industry. However, this suggestion of the guilds is a good one, because we haven't contacted them as far as I know, and there may well be people who have more of a, you know, maybe some contacts, people, you know, get us in there for a discussion. I mean, also there is this whole issue about getting insurance for flood risk. I mean, I just moved house and I'm not in a flood risk zone, but our buildings insurance, they won't give me flood risk cover. I'm assuming I'm not going to be flooded, but a lot more companies now are not providing this kind of buildings insurance cover.
Yeah, no, that's a common issue. It came up on a panel. I was at last night, actually. We were talking about, and of course that has an impact on the ability to run businesses and various things like that if you can't get flood cover. So
Okay, thanks. Just before I go back to Paul, I'm just to say what I'm going to do is take everything in the chat and put it in a document so that we've got all of the useful stuff, and I'll make sure I send that round and also create a link on the website. Anyway, back to you, Paul. Oh, sorry, Annabelle. Annabelle.
Well, just one final point, because, like, for example, the lady who runs the Blue campaign, which is Blue Hearts, which people put in gardens to signal that they're growing a wild garden. In the same way, it's a bit like the London Tend mascot. She did a blog for us, a very nice blog, and has actually spoken at one of these meetings. An absolutely lovely talk, in fact. So if anybody's here running a little neighbourhood reserve project or thinking of doing something, we would really appreciate that. Even if you'd like to write a blog, I'm happy to help you with it. If you don't feel confident about writing a blog, you can do it as a Q&A, or we can do it as a little interview with you or something like that, because we're keen to put those things up and out there, so people are aware of these things going on.
Annabelle, do you just want to make clear to everyone who you are and what
Oh
you're
yeah,
doing?
I'm a volunteer on this campaign, and and I've been responsible for initiating some of these blogs or getting people to write them or helping them with them. So I'm very happy to assist if anyone's interested in something like that.
Thanks, Annabelle. Joe just said, do you have a list of all the examples of things going on? There are so many examples. So Alice has said, we're going to pull all this together from today. And that's probably tip of the iceberg territory, isn't it? So which is all good. So yes, and do feel free to contact each other. Use the chat mechanism. If there's someone you've seen and you want to just get in touch with them afterwards, feel free. Lots of people putting some stuff down. South London, good to see South London fighting back, Tooting and Balham and Co. Deciding they want to talk maybe. Just trying to track. So the other thing I just noticed, so the insurance thing, yes, you're right. Christine Abril, who's done loads of work on this, she and I did make overtures to the insurance sector. I think we should go back knocking because I think the timing probably wasn't right and we should try. But any other tips on avenues it weighs in would be great, actually. So feel free to kind of point us in the direction. And just checking the chat, estate agents. Yeah, well, Rosemary and Paul have both talked about estate agents to blame. I think estate agents are still probably bottom of the pile in terms of public enemy number one, although some are trying harder than most to take the crown off them. But yeah, there's a whole thing about lifestyle and what's kind of pushed as, the easy to tend garden, or you could have this is your homes and gardens kind of ideal home type thing, and the kind of paving over the back garden and having a nice barbecue and what have you, and just thinking that that's the only way of doing it. And just to be clear, we've never said, our position has never been don't ever park your car on the garden. The issue is, if you want to park your car in the garden, you could actually still have a garden that isn't just a dead space and a quick way to get pollution into the sewerage system. So there is a debate about road use and transport, absolutely, but it's a kind of getting more bang for your buck, I suppose. But this whole lifestyle stuff, I think you're right. There's a lot of this stuff is just recycled and pushed as being the way you should aspire to, and I think we need to. Also, the myth of ease, quite a lot of evidence showing that some of this it's not harder, and actually once the investment people have made in hard surfacing, and then the idea that is once and for all and it never has weeds growing in it, or if it's got a soak away that never attracts, gets broken or what have you. The idea it's no maintenance or low maintenance is a myth. So there's lots of angles there to pursue. We're nearing the end of our full time together. If anyone wants to react to anything or just share something, that is good too. Free space rather than me talking.
just very quickly, there was a petition a few years ago to actually ban artificial grass, and I don't think it reached enough signatures to actually discuss it in Parliament. But I just feel like maybe now's the time to reignite that campaign.
Yeah, the plastic grass thing, again, perception, ease of use, being able to use the garden all year round, that kind of thing. It's the kind of dying of convenience kind of agenda, isn't it, that I tend to talk about. Yeah, yes. It's a lot of effort to get something debated in Parliament unless you raise it through other means. It does show strength of feeling, but these debates tend not to go very far. I'm not saying they're not valuable, but there are other routes. I think, yeah, it is a problem.
I think we have to do a lot more communicating before going directly to that kind of please legislate. I mean, you can do that, but I think, you know, really politicians need a space to step into where they've got a lot of public support, and that involves a lot of communications, I think. And so I would very much encourage everybody to, you know, to do the comms side of things, so to do the social media if you can, but also to encourage your council to do communications in their newspaper or whatever they put round as well. I just think that side of it is so important, and if you ask most people, you know, why their front garden should be green, they don't know why that is at the moment. So certainly, you know, even up to 5 years ago, I was a bit fuzzy on what that was all about. So I just think we need to do a really basic job of communications here, as well as you know, some harder hitting stuff.
I've just reposted the stat from the RHS's State of Gardening report on the extent of plastic or artificial lawn. So more than 6 times the size of the City of London. So square mile, 6 times. Yeah, well, work it out for yourself. Can't do maths at lunchtime on a Wednesday, for heaven's sake. Offered to make an approach to some insurance companies. That would be great. Who should we pass information on to? Pass it on to Alice. She's got a hand up even, so that's good. We're just about on time. We've got 5 minutes if we want it, but if we want to take an early bath, that's good. Break, that's good too. Alice has put her email. So use Alice's email to any feedback, money, CPRE, would love a bit of financial support as well. There you go, free advert for you, Alice. And ideas, tell us what you find useful. Tell us what you would, what you might want to contribute. And anything else, and ideas or tips, brown paper packages tied up with string, and all of those favourite things would all be good. I think we're reaching a natural end, unless someone's got absolutely bursting to say something. Thank you. Yeah, some good ins on this stuff. I think I would say we're in a pretty good place from 3 or 4 years ago, where it felt like some of us were talking, you know, in a vacuum. We've actually got, we're on the edge of creating quite a lot of interesting stuff, and the community vibrancy and the sharing and lending and tending even of all of this stuff, I think is absolutely the bedrock, and it's stuff you can point at and you say, we want more of this, please, and it can spread, and it works on people wanting to just work together and not be overly controlling about it, and letting people find out. And I think that's the spirit of the network, but also been captured by Joyce in her presentation today. So thanks again, Joyce, for that. We will do a newsletter. We'll summarize all of this stuff. Tell us what you need. Someone's even said, Joyce said, thank you, great way to spend lunchtime. We should do it every day. See you tomorrow. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Let us know what you want. Cheers. Bye.